Okay. How long were you in the Atlit camp?
How old?
How long were you there?
We were about 8 months there. And then we were released. We were released, the door was opened, bye-bye.
And where did you and your family go then?
Yes, we had a family in Rishon LeZion. We had a cousin of mine who was in Dachau, and released from Dachau under the condition that he leaves the country. He was arrested during the Crystal Night. This was not yet the death factories that came later. But it was the start of it, because they picked up people and sent them to this camp. He was in Dachau with his brother, and they were released. He was a building engineer, and his brother was a professor of physics at the university. So his brother left to Shanghai. To Shanghai, you needed no visa. You needed only a traveling ticket, and no visa was required to come to China. So he was sent to China, and there he was teaching at schools. He found a job, and his brother went to Rishon LeZion.
And so he provided housing temporarily for you and your family when you left Atlit.
Yes, but I have to add one funny thing. If it weren't serious, it really would be funny. When we were released from Atlit, my father and I were released. My mother had to stay there another 4 or 6 weeks.
Why?
A mistake. Maybe somebody with a similar name was released on her name. Anyhow, they released all of us. But my mother and another few women had to stay there for another 4 or 6 years. So when my father and I were released, we wanted to go knock at the door and say there's something. There was no door where you could knock. There was no person of the management of the camp of Atlit that you could speak to. They were aloof.
Okay, so now after your mother and your sister were released also, what was life like in Palestine at the time, and what did your father do and what did you do?
Yes, okay. My father found a job in the British camp. He worked there as a civilian.
In Atlit?
No, not in Atlit. In Sarafend. Sarafend, Tzrifin. First he was cleaning the carpentry, and then later became a carpenter himself. He had good hands, he could do things, but he didn't learn carpentry. But if you would have told him, I want to build here a stage, he could do it. He was a jack of all trades. He could do anything. So anyhow, he moved into this, and my parents hired a room in Rishon LeZion, and he had the salary of a cleaner, later improved as a carpenter, And I went to school, Ben Shemen. There was the youth village, Ben Shemen, where I was sent to, and I enjoyed it very much. I even joined the Palmach later. Coming out from school, Ben Shemen, I joined the Palmach, which I personally didn't like. I didn't like because they didn't like Yekes. Germans, Austrians were called stupid. They are stupid. Actually, it was not stupidity. It was easy belief. Yekes believed everything you told them.
They were naive.
Naive. Naive is the word I wanted. But my vocabulary is leaking. I'm losing.
So what was life like for your family? Did you feel you were living a comfortable life at that time, or was it poverty?
We had a good life in Rishon LeZion. My parents went almost every evening to a Gazoz kiosk in Rishon LeZion, drank their glass of soda, and met a lot of people. And there were two people coming from Tel Aviv looking for my father, because he, in the filming business in Vienna, was quite a name. He was. So they came and asked him to find a job for them. So he was laughing. I have no job here. Here they worked still with cameras that they had to rotate by hand. They were not electric, no batteries. This was poor country for filmmakers. So they were surprised. My father, in the festivals of Salzburg, there was Max Reinhardt ran them, and my father was his right hand, because my father could fix anything.
During that time of the British Mandate,
Yes.
later in the British Mandate, let's say 1945 to 1948, how do you feel about the British policies in that era, stopping the Exodus ship from coming in, etc.,
Yes.
etc.?
Yes. Well, the British were very much afraid of what would happen with the Arabs if we helped the Jews. So if they did help us, and they did sometimes, it was little and quiet. But they were very much afraid.
So would you say that the British policy was motivated less by anti-Semitism and more about fear of what the Arabs would do?
Yes, I think their policy was motivated by eagerness to satisfy the Arabs and not fulfill the mandate which they got from the not United Nations,
The League of Nations.
the League of Nations. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they did not fulfill it because they were scared. But then, on the other hand, the British government shot themselves in the leg. By being scared of the Arabs, they defied the help that they could get from as young people, I was too young for joining the army at the beginning. But later I got into that age. But if they had accepted a few hundred young men, and if they had not interrupted the transfer of military personnel from India to the Middle East, the situation in Libya would have been much better. A few hundred soldiers don't make the difference, but it helps. And to get the goodwill of the Jewish people in Israel to join the army and help them to fight the Germans. This was not yet, what was his name, the German general?
Rommel. General Rommel, Field Marshal
Rommel, yes, Rommel. I forget names.
Let me ask you another question. After that experience with the British, how did you feel towards the British in the years following, even into after independence in 1948?
After independence, very good.
So you did not hold a grudge against the British? I
don't hold a grudge. I just feel that at that time they did all the wrong things that could be expected. You see, to take the Patria out of the line, it was transferring troops from India to North Africa. I am sure they didn't ask General
Rommel.
No, Rommel's
Montgomery.
Montgomery. If they had asked Montgomery, can we take the ship? And then he would have told them to go to hell. He needs the soldiers from India.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that the military authorities have not been asked. The ship was requisited, 10,000-ton ship. A run to India would be, let's say, about 10 days one way. Every 10 days one way. So, in the ship, you can take...
So they were sacrificing the number of troops that
Yes.
they could bring to the front.
They gave priority to deporting a few hundred Jews to Mauritius. That was under priority. So I believe that the British authorities in Palestine were not in tune with those in Britain. I cannot believe that a person like Churchill would take such stupid decisions. Forgive me for saying stupid. It was lunatics.
Okay, that's good.
And maybe that locally, perhaps here and there, an influential person who was anti-Semitically involved, that could be. It could be, but it was not the main aim.
Anything else you'd like to add about this era and about the Patria in particular? Is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered that you think is important?
Yes. There is a great mistake in Atlit. In Atlit in Israel, there is people who keep the archives and history of the illegal immigration. And they called our aliyah the Patria aliyah, aliyat Patria. And that created many misunderstandings. because the Patria was a deporting ship. It was intended to deport us from here. It didn't bring us here. We came with 3 refugee ships that nobody knows the names, but it was aliyat, Atlantic, Pacific, and Milos. The Patria was a deportation ship. So if somebody asks me, how did you come to Israel? And I say as a refugee, if I would tell to him, on what ship? If I would say on Pacific, nobody would know. If I would say Patria, aliyat Patria, they would know. So Patria did not take refugees from Nazi country to Israel. On the contrary, it deported. It was intended for deportation. And the poor thing that happened, that the explosion, which was intended to prevent the sailing of the ship, sank it completely. So this was a technical mistake, but it was not the intention of those who did it.
Let me, that's good. I want to read